Hey everybody, it's Lindsay J back with another video, and today I am so excited because we are going to be talking about how so many people have fallen in love with the idea of someone, but not the person themselves. So let's go straight into this episode. Dear Diary, there's a quiet kind of heartbreak that doesn't come from losing someone, but from realizing you were never really loving them to begin with. You were loving the potential, the almost, the version of them that only exists in your imagination. The one who finally gets it right, who finally chooses you fully, who becomes everything they promised in glimpses but never sustained in reality. And I think that's where so many of us get stuck. Because when you sit with who they actually are right now, in the present moment, without the filters, without the excuses, without the emotional investments you've already made, you don't feel fulfilled. You feel confused, you feel unseen, you feel like you're constantly negotiating your own needs just to keep the connection alive. But instead of calling it what it is, we tell ourselves stories. We say, they just need time. We've been through too much to walk away. I can't start over. And underneath all of that is fear. Fear of being alone, of letting go of the time you've already invested, of admitting that what you thought was love might have just been attachment wrapped in hope. So today we're talking about that. The difference between loving someone and loving the idea of who you need them to become just to stay with them. XOXO, LJ. I want to talk about how we now live in a world of complete delusional people. And the reason I say this is because so many times I see people in these unfulfilling relationships that are completely draining the life out of them. And for some reason, they have convinced themselves that these are their only last choices when it comes to romance. And they may try to convince themselves that they know that's not the case. But if it weren't the case, then why are you withstanding a person who mistreats you, a person who doesn't make you happy, and a person who in the present moment doesn't make for a great partner to you? But it's like we hold on because of hope, of faith, of believing that someone will become the version we've mocked up in our head, when in actuality, we need to accept people for who they are and where they're at in the moment that we meet them. Too many times I see people get into these relationships and try to fix people, try to change them into a version of them that they saw in their head, or the version of them that they wish they would be, without realizing that they need to love the person first before they can even do any changing. It's natural for us to change in relationships, in the ebbs and flow of relationships, to change the dynamics periodically, but it is completely abnormal to live in a state of stress and constant anxiety while you are within a relationship. And too many times the world has tried to convince us that the more you argue, the more strong the relationship is, or the more the person cares, when in actuality it couldn't be further from the truth. People who truly care about us are willing to sit in discomfort long enough, including negative emotions, but in a way that becomes productive as opposed to destructive. They're capable of expressing their emotions, their needs, without easily walking away or getting, heated up and short-tempered. These are individuals who, because they respect you and because they respect the relationship, are not willing to do anything that could jeopardize the connection, even in the smallest ways. So I feel like the biggest showcasing of love, and the way that we need to be framing it, is that a person who loves us is not going to mistreat us. At least not on purpose. Yelling, screaming, all those things to me are not characteristics of someone who loves and respects me, or loves and respects the connection. Because at the end of the day, when you fall in love with someone, or when we fall in love in general, the version of us that falls in love with them is typically the child version of us. So it sounds like a weird way to reframe things, but I think that it's not. Because if you would find it offensive to speak to a child in the mannerisms that the person speaks to you, then why are you allowing them to treat you that way? Just because you're older? It's like basically the way that I look at it, and what I mean by giving that analogy is basically just saying that if there's somebody who yells at you, who gets upset with you for little miniature mistakes, and they get upset in ways that are very destructive and, outward facing or projection and all those things, if you were a child, would you justify their behavior, or would you protect the child from that individual? You would protect them. So why is it that we don't treat ourselves with the same respect and sentiment? Why is it that we allow ourselves to put up with dynamics and things and treatments that we wouldn't even want a child to experience? And I know we can blame it on the fact that we're older so we can withstand more, but we shouldn't have to. Not in our relationships. Now that we're older, now that we're adults, we can make the active decision to choose relationships that don't mirror our traumas. We have the power to take the joy back in our lives, and sometimes getting that joy back is learning how to love yourself enough to where you love them less than you love yourself. You need to love yourself more. And sometimes loving yourself more includes walking away from the people we love. Because at the end of the day, if they are not making you happy right now, then what is it that you truly love about that person? Is it the version of them they used to be? Or is it the version of them you hope they become? Because if it's ever in the past tense and it's always in the future, but it's never happiness in the present, then you are wasting your life for someone who doesn't deserve the time. When I look at life, I look at it like a giant string, and I feel as though we all go through this string and we have things that get in the way, and we can choose to stop there or go around the hurdle and find a new pathway back to the road. But it's like this giant string. And when we look back at the grand scheme of our lifespan, the things we take with us the most are the things that made us happy. The traumas that we experience and all those things will be temporarily washed away in the moment that we are, about to pass. So all the things that come back to us are all of our happiest moments. And those happiest moments have nothing to do with accolades or awards or any educational background type stuff. These are heart-to-heart moments. And when you spend your everyday laying your head next to someone who keeps you in a constant state of survival mode and stress, you are choosing to spend a majority of your life unhappy. You're choosing to experience the world through a lens that is inherently negative by proxy. We become the average of who we spend our time with. So if the person we spend the most of our time with is unhealthy, toxic, unwilling to grow and change, stuck in their ways, that doesn't rub off on us in a positive way. So you could be the most ambitious person. You could be fighting so hard to build, to grind your own business, to do your own thing, to become a powerful, successful person. But when you have a partner who's not on that same frequency, you may not stop your grind. A lot of people do, unfortunately. And then they lose themselves in the relationship. But even if you don't fully lose yourself, you still lose aspects of yourself because you're no longer grinding as hard. And parts of that are normal for when you go into a relationship. It's pretty normal to not always grind as much as you did when you were single. But at the same time, though, you want a partner who pushes you to continue your grind. Someone who shows up for every single event. I mean, for me, I'm a model, so I'd be very attracted to a man who shows up to every single one of my shows, who brings me flowers as a celebration, who, encourages me to continue to make my content, to continue to build my brand, to continue to be who I desire to be one day, to love me right now with the understanding of who I'm becoming. And, that is pretty much what I'm looking for. And I think is what we all really need at the end of the day. So many times we end up settling for people that just enable our existing traumas that we refuse to heal. We end up in partnerships that mirror dynamics we've experienced before because most people run in a cyclical way. And so their whole life's existence is almost like a continuous cycle. They go through the same kinds of relationships, experience the same levels of harm, because when pain, violence, and disrespect is your baseline, that eventually becomes your norm. And when we live in a world right now that's dysfunctional, that means we have normalized dysfunction for ourselves. And if we don't work hard to actively change and reframe the world around us, or reframe our minds so that we can recreate the world around us if we're unhappy right now, without that ability to step outside of yourself and recognize your own flaws so that you can grow and become the person that you want, is a skill in itself. And it takes a lot. And those are the type of people you want to be with if you are on your grind, if you're trying to gain success, okay? You can't do these big projects alone. You can try, but it will always be better if you have a healthy partner with you. But every time I just feel like I get so disappointed because I see so many people who are like miserable in their relationship, super unhappy, getting into drugs, getting into alcoholism because their relationship isn't satisfying, not having physical intimacy for extended periods of time, and infidelity being a concern. And I see this pattern all the time with so many people nowadays that it's extremely upsetting. So many people willing to put aside their needs, their standards, and even their morals in order to stay within a relationship that's not even serving them. And it hurts to watch because I can't relate. When I see red flags, I don't ignore them. I don't. I take them as information, and most times I leave. I get so frustrated because this is something I've already talked about, but I believe wholeheartedly that women are to blame for why the dating world sucks right now, because you guys have lost all of your standards. You don't know how to make boundaries with guys. You allow them to have their cake and eat it too, because you give them everything that they want without a commitment. So what is there to commit to? He's able to talk to a bunch of different girls. He's able to go out on dates with other people if he wanted to. And here you are cutting off your other options because you hope this man one day decides that he wants you. If he wanted you, he would do it. He would show it. He would make the effort and put in the work. Okay. And some of these players, they're obviously players because they'll tell you they don't want anything and then they'll take you out and do all these things. And again, it's been a saying forever, but if a man tells you who he is, trust him. Don't stay. What are you doing? You're wasting your time. Like, one of the other things that frustrates me too is that people are so unrealistic about their future. I'm 26, so while that might sound young to a lot of people in our weird modern dating culture, that may seem young for dating, it's actually considered older when you look at history and how most traditions are. Most people my age, when it comes to traditional standards, would most likely be on at least their first or second child and married. So the reason I say we need to be more realistic is because you're not calculating the amount of time it takes for us to even get the desired ending. If you want to start a family, if you want to have kids, even if I met someone today, okay, at 26, I'm not realistically going to even be able to have a child with them until sometime in my early 30s. Because if I followed the general norm of how relationships flow, you got the first 2 to 3 years of boyfriend and girlfriend before an engagement even pops up on the table. Then there's another year planning the wedding, and then another year or two where you want to enjoy the marriage. And then after that is when you start having the kids. So by the time that I actually do any of those things, I will most likely be 32 or 33. And to me, that is a little bit on the older side traditionally when it comes to having children, but it's more on the normal side when it comes to how modern dating is. And that's what concerns me. So many people talking about how they want to build a life, they want to have a family, they want to do all these things, but then they make decisions and do things that don't actually encourage the life that they want. I have so many friends that won't listen to a man when he says he's disinterested because he gives them a little bit of attention. And I'm like, no, it's just called breadcrumbing. It's a real term for a reason. They're giving you just enough for you to stay because they like your presence and maybe you're putting out so they get their cake and eat it too. But they give you just enough to keep you around in their orbit, but they won't commit or settle with you. And if a dude is doing that, take the hint to not stay loyal, okay? Maybe you could talk to him. Maybe you could, go out every now and then, but don't sleep with him. Don't be kissing on him. Don't be physically intimate. Let a man show you who he is. By taking away all of those things, it will weed out the ones who are real and the ones who are not. Most of those men are doing it because they gain a benefit. They gain a benefit from kissing, from the physical intimacy and connection. And so when you give them that benefit, when you give them that closeness without any boundaries of requiring a relationship or requiring certain standards, it pretty much just allows them to run rampant and see how much they can get away with. And this is something that we see all the time. Obviously, since I'm a woman, I can only talk about dating men. So if I use examples, I just want people to know that this can translate to both genders. I'm not really sexist when it comes to my dating ideas. I focus more on human psychology when I approach dating. So I'm just using guy because I date men, but and I talk about women mostly because I am a woman who hangs out with mostly women. I don't have any male friends. I don't want any male friends. I find that weird. I think that if you want a serious relationship with someone, it seems very pointless to be spending time. Like, for example, if I'm in a relationship right now, I don't want to be spending my free time hanging out with another man. I want to be spending my free time building my life with my man, or if he's busy, spending time with my friends, my girlfriends, building a powerful group of women around me so that I can have a place to express myself and feel like myself where it's completely detached from him, but it just hurts. It hurts to watch. I hate seeing so many people giving up on themselves just for a little bit of attention. It's like we're so beautiful. We have all these things going for us, and then we give all of our stuff away like easily to these dudes who don't even deserve it. I mean, for me, I cannot really relate because I get treated pretty well. I feel like dudes may say dumb things to me or I call them tantrums, where like a dude gets really triggered by something I say because I'm too accurate and they don't like the accuracy, because a lot of people don't want to hear what they need to hear. And unfortunately, I think the main reason people don't want to hear what they need to hear is because like so many people are used to kind of existing in a vacuum. Most of their friends, most of their relationships kind of just enable their unhealthy and toxic patterns of, dating or existing. Just, they reinforce their toxic behavior so that they're not forced to grow and change in discomfort. And when you have a whole circle of people who enable, your dysfunction, it's very intimidating to have someone just come along and question everything you think you've known, especially when you're already in a dark place in survival mode, making decisions that are based off of fear. Like it's a bad place to be existing from, and it's a bad place to be making decisions from. So when you don't listen to the hard truths, you end up getting hurt more, And so I've had situations where I tell guys a hard truth because they're so used to yes women who walk on eggshells because they're afraid to lose the guy. I'm not like that. I'm going to tell you straight up how it is and what it is so that we can make sure that you're growing. I don't want to be with a man who stays stuck in dysfunction. I want a man who's actively growing, who's trying to build his life up for a family, for a connection, for the things that are real in this life. For some people, it sounds drastic to say, but for me, I'm like, I'm going to be a billionaire one day. You know what? I'm going to be a trillionaire one day. And I need a man who's on that frequency, because if he is not, we will never be able to match grind. And a guy who cannot match my grind is going to slow me down on mine, and I can't afford to do that. I don't want to do that. I can't afford to do that. And honestly, it's just not interesting enough to do that. Like for example here, I run a nonprofit organization, a women's empowerment group, a production company, and a personal brand, all while also continuing a super long written diary series. It takes me a podcast as well. These things take me a lot of time, a lot of effort. I have a very full life. So when I go on a date with a guy or I do things with a guy, it is very intentional. So if he's not matching the intention, I don't want to waste my time. I don't want to spend, 4 hours with a dude on a date when I could be editing content or scheduling my next post or responding back to one of the various brands that are asking for a partnership. I have better things that I could be doing than entertaining someone who doesn't even want me in the way that I want them. Someone who's not even aligned with my frequency. And too many times people are so desperate for relationships that they will just grasp at literally nothing in order to try and convince themselves that the person likes them. And I'm like, no, they don't. I wish that they did, but they don't. And I know you don't want to hear that because it's painful to say, and you're used to all these other like girls or people around you being like, oh my God, yeah, like he'll probably come around. Like, no, he's not going to come around. He told you he wasn't. Listen to that. If you don't, you're dumb. You're going to get your heart broken, and that's on you. But these are all the red flags. These are all the red signs that you should be paying attention to. You know what I mean? And unfortunately, that can rub people off the wrong way. But even in those cases, though, to me, I don't really have like full-blown negative experiences with the dudes that I date, at least not in my opinion. So I always walk away feeling solid. I don't really feel like my life is over or like we're just misaligned in that moment, because I'm serious, y'all. I want a relationship, and I don't want a casual little cute relationship situationship. I want a full-blown relationship that lasts until death do us part. I'm tired of playing games. I don't really see the point in going out on dates a bunch of times when I have like a full blown life and a whole trajectory I'm working on. I have so many things going on, and I feel like that's what people need to focus on. I attract a lot of high value men. They're doing well and like financially doing well in their career. They're, kind, take me out to nice places. I date those high value men. Okay. And so many women are like, well, then how are you able? And I'm like, because I'm so busy and full in my own life that it attracts them to me more, because it makes me scarce. And this scarcity principle is the number one thing that successful men value. If they know that you're hard to pin down, you're not going to parties, you're not really at events because you're working, you're traveling, you're doing things with your life, it makes you rare. And high value men are attracted to the individuals and the women who are rare. It's how our minds are programmed. That's why people have diamonds that are so expensive, because they're rare. You have zirconia everywhere and gems and all those things and stones, but there's nothing like a crystal diamond. And because of that, because they're so rare and hard to get and hard to find and hard to cultivate and take care of, they are now up in value. And that is my point. That's how I want to be for myself. Okay. I am the diamond, and I'm not going to be spending all this time around different people taking from my energy without fueling back into it. It's like, how many events have you gone to? How many shows have you done? How many shoots have you done? How many opportunities have you gone to that have brought you absolutely nothing? And I bet you that a majority of you will say that a majority of the places you've been do not bring you anything. And that's fine, but you need to acknowledge that for what it is, which is not good. You need to be putting yourself in rooms that level you up every time that you step in there. But if you keep circulating in the same crews and the same groups, doing the same thing over and over again, you will never reach that higher level. Because when you're not immediately in the level that you wish to be in, you have to push yourself into environments that you've maybe never been in before. You need to go to places and be around people that are well above you, and sometimes people are intimidated spending time with people who are much more successful, much more wealthy. It's like they've pedestalized them and put them on this super unrealistic pedestal, so much so that they almost become starstruck. They don't see themselves as a peer subconsciously. So they pedestal that person, and it becomes really difficult for you to pick up on their gems, on their knowledge, on their experiences, and gain any real networking from it. Because instead of meeting them as a peer, you're meeting them as an individual who looks up to them. And that maybe doesn't seem like a big difference, but that perspective of approaching changes your experiences drastically. When you walk into a room and you don't care how successful someone is, and you don't know what they care about, what they do or how much they make, you meet them as a human. You meet them on a human base. And humanity is the strongest way to network ever. If you care about people and you learn how to care about new people, and those people will learn to care about you. And when they care about you, they want to pour into you. And people who are highly successful have the funds and ability to do so. So by befriending individuals with the means, you make high value friendships. And I don't mean high value when it comes to monetary gain, status gain. I mean high value in the sense that you're meeting someone who's going to push you in the direction that you said you want. You're going to have a supporter who understands the grind that you're on and the trajectory that you're on. And you're going to have somebody who actively decides to support you with the abilities that they do have, with the connections they do have. And it's through that teamwork that most people a majority of these people are able to be successful. Most of these top businesses and companies aren't even owned by one individual. They usually have several shareholders who can technically act as board members, as all types of stuff. So a majority of the largest companies in the world are no longer run by just one CEO alone. Most people don't know that because they keep it kind of under wraps. But at the end of the day, a majority of the biggest powerhouses in the world, all of the top powerhouses in the world really, are not owned by one individual. They're not sustained by one individual. They're sustained by a network of powerful people who have then trickled that success downwards in order to benefit to the max for themselves. And these are things that you can do for yourself and cultivate in your everyday life, but it starts with your home. It starts with the person you choose to spend your life with. If you choose to be with someone who stays stuck on the couch, who plays games, who doesn't do things, who doesn't have any ambition, has no future trajectory, doesn't know what they're doing, you are going to spend a lot of your time stressed. And why spend years and make all these memories of negativity when you don't have to? Sometimes it feels like being alone is way worse, but after you actually just take that jump and you're like, you know what? I want to be alone and see if I can find better. You will never go back. I mean, I'm very lonely, don't get me wrong, but I'm so happy that I live alone and that I have my own space and that I'm happy being single, because it's like people always get it twisted. They think that because I'm lonely and I get sad being single, that means that my dating life sucks, but it doesn't. I actually have a really great time dating. The guys that take me out, I feel like I have really great memories with, so I can't really complain about dating, at least not on my end. I'm sure that those individuals probably have other things to say, because I know a lot of them are unhealed and project a lot of negative energy. But at the end of the day, things, in my opinion, were not as bad as how it sounds to be for a lot of people. And it's because I constantly ask myself specific questions in a relationship. And the number one that I always tell people is, if this person stays exactly the same as how they are today, would I be happy for the rest of my life? If the answer is no, then you need to get out. That's it. It shouldn't be complicated. It shouldn't be something you stew on, because the longer you stew, the harder it gets. The longer you're with someone, the more likely you are to settle. And I hate when people settle, because it makes them terrible friends. Not like terrible, like they're mean all of a sudden, but terrible in the sense that their energy is always down. They're always sad. They can't do as many things. And it's that limitation exactly that makes it so risky to stay in relationships that are so unhealthy. We will always have to limit our lives and, be open to changing aspects of our lives and compromising on certain things if we want to be in a relationship. All of those things are normal, but we should never have to compromise on our own happiness and joy. We should never have to worry that all of our greatest moments are going to be taken over by our partner because they did something disrespectful the same day. We can't keep living in these unhealthy cycles, because it rubs off into the rest of your life. Now you aren't seeing the world through a happy lens, and when you're not seeing the world through a happy lens, all of your lived experiences are muted, but when you have that like breathy feeling of not being constantly stressed because of somebody else's negative energy, you have this weight that's just completely lifted off of you, and it gives you the space to just go out into the world and feel good, cultivate joy, and become your own light source of happiness. But when you have to constantly loop and break down and psychoanalyze another person, you no longer have the cognitive space for your own self. So even if you do focus on yourself, grind at the highest capacity, that doesn't mean you're grinding at your full potential. It means that you're surviving right now. And don't you want to see what your life looks like when you're at your full potential, when you're fully happy and living the life that you want? Don't you want to see what that looks like? Or is everybody just like, I have completely given up on my own happiness? Like, but why though? And right now, it's more vital than ever that we spread happiness and joy, because look at the world we live in right now. So many bad things, so many sad things, so many scary things going on. So if we don't learn how to cultivate joy for ourselves, we could never become a lighthouse for anyone else. And if we don't have any lighthouses out there, how in the world are we supposed to grow? How in the world are we supposed to heal through these treacherous times? And how in the world are we supposed to hold on to our faith in humanity and our faith for whatever it is we believe in that helps us to stay positive, grounded, and kind to others? And that's why I'm like, okay, well, we need to really start focusing on who we choose to spend our time with. And I feel like our partners are the number one start of that. It's the most important person to choose accurately. This is the person that's going to hold you through the death of your family members, of your pets, someone who would have to show up for you in the hospital if something happened. And if you can't trust this person to handle those responsibilities when, everything hits the fan, then why are you with this person? This person isn't going to show up for you in your darkest moments. They're not going to show up for you in the ways that will help keep you safe when you're in your most vulnerable moments. And that is not a person worthy of your time, energy, or mental space. So that's why I keep telling people, you don't love them. You love the version of them you hope they become, or the version of them that they used to be. And the unfortunate thing about that is that once you take off the blinders, you start to realize that the version of them you hope for is in the past or in the future. And because of that, who you are right now is having to suffer because your head is stuck in a world that currently does not exist. So I encourage every single person to sit with themselves, to sit with them thoughts, to write in their journals why it is they feel like they can't tackle loneliness, like they've tackled every other trauma in their life. We don't give ourselves enough credit to how much we've accomplished, to how much we've had to withstand in our lives. And also, we doubt our own capacity. Trust me, you can handle another heartbreak. Allow yourself to be sad. It means you're human, not weak. So leaving a person you love is hard, but you need to love yourself more before you ruin the rest of your life waiting for someone who will never be the person you wish them to be. And sometimes it's leaving them that causes them to grow and change into the person we are looking for, and then they come back. Most of the people we date end up coming back, and most of the time they end up coming back more than once. So sometimes time is what's needed in order for a relationship to be truly tested. And if they're your person, then it will all work out in the end. What will be, will be. You know, we can't say what will happen tomorrow, which is why we have to focus on the now. We can't stay stuck in the past of who they were. We can't stay stuck in the future of who they could become if they decided to become healthier or change their ways. We need to look at who they are right now and how who they are right now fits into the grand scheme of our own personal life, our own personal growth, and especially our own personal happiness. Because too many people are out here feeling so unhappy in the lives they've created for themselves. And they look at their lives through a victim mentality of feeling like they don't have more control over their lives than they do. Because half the time, the issues that we have are the things we fear, the things we maybe don't like all the time, are things that we have created fear around. Not because they're actually scary, but because our mind isn't used to that level of discomfort, isn't used to that environment, isn't used to that experience. So instead of approaching it with curiosity, it pushes it away. And in doing so, we actually hurt ourselves long term, because it's through sitting inside discomfort where we learn to grow. You know, we have to learn how to sit in discomfort and find ways to, you know, self-regulate so that we can continue to withstand more and more and more and grow this, you know, big boundary around us that keeps us protected from negativity and negative energy and helps us to manifest more abundance into our own personal life, where we get more money, we get more love, we get more followers if that's what you want. You know what I mean? And we do level up into the version of ourselves that we wish to be. But to even start that path, you need to kill your ego and you need to kill your pride, and you need to admit to yourself that you're not happy where you are, that you're not happy in your relationship. And once you can finally admit that, and once you can finally accept that fact, that is the moment where the sky becomes the limit. That is the moment where you begin your true journey into your own self-awakening, into your own self-reflection, into, you know, all of these things that are just so important, but that we try to ignore or distract ourselves. Relationships are becoming distractions now. They're not becoming catalysts for growth, change, and happiness. They're becoming distractions, ways for us to cope and deal with a lot of the things we have not healed yet. And it just concerns me. It just concerns me. But we'll continue this conversation soon. So I want to get into the outro diary, because I feel like this is, again, important for you guys to hear. So let's get straight into the outro. Dear diary, maybe this is the hardest truth to sit with, that sometimes the person you're holding on to only exists in your head, because love, real love, doesn't require you to constantly rewrite someone in order to feel safe with them. It doesn't ask you to shrink your standards, ignore your intuition, or wait indefinitely for potential to turn into reality. And if you're honest with yourself, you already know the difference. You can feel it in the quiet moments, in the conversations that leave you empty instead of understood, in the way you keep hoping for something that hasn't shown up yet. That's not love, that's longing. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to believe in someone, but there is something painful about abandoning yourself in order to do so. So if you take anything from this episode, let it be this. You don't have to stay loyal to someone's potential at the expense of your reality. You are allowed to choose what's real. You are allowed to walk away from what keeps asking you to wait, and you are allowed to admit that loving yourself sometimes looks like letting go of the version of them that never truly existed. I'll keep my clarity. I'll keep my standards. And I'll keep choosing what's in front of me, not what I have to imagine to make it worth it. Because I'd rather face the truth alone than stay in a love that only survives in my head. XOXO. LJ.